like to welcome everyone here today to the meeting of the IJB. I would like, and could we have microphones off, please? I would like to indicate that the public section of this meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and it will be published online for public viewing after the meeting. I would like to ask members to activate their cameras where possible to enable you to join by video, and could all attendees please mute their microphones when you're not speaking. Please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. If members wish to speak on any point, please notify me via the instant message function in the Skype meeting invite. Or if you've dialed into the meeting, indicate by stating your name and the item you wish to speak on, and I will bring you in at the appropriate time. If any members lose connection or have any technical issues during the meeting, please alert Jan, the committee officer, by separate Skype instant message, or indicate through myself, and support, if required, will be available from our ICT colleagues during the meeting. So with that, we will turn to the agenda. Can I ask members if you have any declarations? Oh, I beg your pardon. Jan, could we have the Sederunt, please? I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, we have apologies from Mr. Anderson, but Mr. Tomlinson will be here in her stead from 11. So we have Mrs. Atkinson. Hello.
Yes, I'm here.
Sorry, apologies. I thought it was myself. Thank you.
No, it's me.
Mrs. Duncan.
Yes.
Provost Howitson. I'll leave the Provost for a moment and come back. Miss Little.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Reynolds.
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
And good morning, Jan.
Good morning, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Ross.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Councillor Sterling.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlinson won't be here till 11ish, as I said before, and Miss Webb may not be here. If we turn to the non-voting members, Chair, Dr. Allen. Miss Culbert.
Present. It's Mrs.
Thank you. Mr. Heckler.
Good morning.
Good morning. Mrs. Kinsey.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Mrs. Kirk.
Morning.
Good morning. Mr. Mackay. I think we have apologies from Miss McNichol. Dr. Metcalf.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning. Mr. Mitchell. We have apologies, Chair, from Mrs. Much. Mr. Ramsey.
Present.
Mr. Sharp.
Present.
Thank you. And Mrs. Wood.
Good morning.
Thank you. Chair, I will go back, and we do know that Councillor Howitson is having issues this morning, but to try again, Councillor Howitson, are you there? That's us. Thank you very much, Chair.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And do members have any declarations of interests, please? No declarations. Thank you very much. Can I ask you to agree to have due regard to our equalities duty, please? And please only indicate in the message panel if you do not agree. Okay, that is agreed. Thank you very much. It's my intention to take items 14A, 14 and 15 in private session. Can we agree that, please?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Which takes us then to the minute of the meeting of the Integrated Joint Board of the 4th of November 2020. Can we agree in the first instance that that was the correct note of the meeting?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Do members have any items on page, any matters they wish to raise on page 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14? No, thank you very much. So that is agreed that that minute is correct. And we'll move then to item 4 on our agenda, which is the Integration Joint Board Action Log, and that's on page 15 of your pack. Can I invite members to make any observations, comments, or ask any questions, please? Councillor Reynolds, please.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the minor injury unit and the decision or purpose of report, can I please raise a question that I have regarding the minor injury unit at Banff Chalmers Hospital?
Councillor, this item just is a statement of outstanding business. So really it was just based on the information before you. So have you indicated to officers that you might have a question?
Well, not in advance, but I do have an issue about the decision or purpose of report, and I'm just seeking an update specifically in relation to the MIU at Banff. Otherwise, I don't understand why my question wouldn't be pertinent, Chair.
I'm just checking, Councillor Reynolds, that it's relevant to the paper in front of us. Thank you.
It is. I do believe it is relevant. Can I proceed?
Thank you.
Okay. It's just in relation to the minor injury unit at Banff. I'm aware that the IJB minute for September said that there would be a detailed update in November or December, and I see the note that we have before us here. I have a sort of issue which I have raised with officers, and they will be fully aware of it, and I know that there's been correspondence with Angie and parliamentarians regarding this. I'm not going to refer to that, but it would be very useful. It would be very useful, Chair, to have a more detailed update regarding the situation in Banff, because it's raised consistently in the media and by the Community Council and the Community Safety Group. And what I would be asking is that it would be helpful if it could be stated for the record that the current COVID-related closure of the Banff MIU will not be continued indefinitely, and I would be grateful if a statement could be made by way of press release regarding the situation at Banff, and I think that's entirely pertinent to the statement that's made under MIU in the paper before us. So I'm seeking that there will be some clarification by way of formal release so that the public are made aware of what the reasoning is for the continued closure of Banff, because they're not, and they should be, because media speculation is not helpful. This has been raised with officers, Chair, and bearing in mind the paper and the reference before us, I think it's pertinent to seek that now.
Well, Councillor Reynolds, I will ask Mrs Wood to comment on the generality of the status of unscheduled care. And this paper, or the statement of outstanding business, does not relate simply to one site. And you will be aware that officers have been meeting with representatives from various groups, some of which you've mentioned, in the Banff area in recent weeks. So there has been ongoing dialogue, and I'm also, well, you're very aware that the area committee has also been raising questions too. So, and I have seen press comments from yourself as well. So I think the opportunity for this is the IJB outstanding business. So what I'll do now is ask Mrs Wood, indeed, Dr Metcalf, and I think that I'll ask Mrs Wood to talk about the generality of the unscheduled care piece, but I'm very keen to stick to the agenda as is printed and is set before us in terms of this board's reports which will come forward. Mrs Wood.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Reynolds, for that question. I mean, I think we have been very clear, Councillor Reynolds, and I apologise if that hasn't been clear enough. That the decisions based around our Banff Minor Injuries Unit are very much in keeping with the precautions that are in place around ensuring that we have COVID secure services and buildings. So if there's something we need to revisit there, I'm happy to do that. I am aware that Mark Simpson has met with a number of the groups that you've discussed recently. Certainly Mark, he's not with us at the moment, he will be later, but Mark certainly felt he had assured. So if that's not the case, happy to take that off the table and discuss. I did meet this morning, another meeting with John Thompson, who is leading the unscheduled care work across Grampian. Again, this is a very fast moving and changing situation, but there is work ongoing to look at how we best respond to the unscheduled care demands across the whole area through this ongoing COVID response. I had hoped that John would be able to give me something from a verbal update today. That hasn't come through as yet, but if it would be helpful, Chair, more than happy to pull together a briefing for the IJB around exactly what our position is today around that. It is an evolving situation and responding very much to the changing needs that both COVID and the winter are putting our way, but more than happy, Chair, to provide that if that would be helpful. Thank you.
Well, if it's a general briefing on the unscheduled care element of it, that's fine. I'm sure members would be very happy to receive that. But I'm not going to pursue the particular questions that Councillor Reynolds has raised at this time, because I don't believe it's something that is particularly pertinent to this item on our agenda. But Councillor Reynolds, I'm happy to speak to you after the meeting, as officers would be too. But this is absolutely not something that I'm going to take as a detailed piece at this time.
Can we have that as an agenda item?
Sorry, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor. The IJB report will come forward in terms of unscheduled care in due course, and we'll get a date for that. So can I then move to Councillor Ross, please?
Good morning, everyone. My question relates to the outstanding items on page 16, Operation Home First. It says that a report will be coming back to the IJB as a 6-monthly update. I was wondering, given that the Operation Home First is a new initiative, whether we would be able to get a report before the 6 months that has been stated previously in the update. The reason for that is it's new, but I would like to know how it's working. Is it a revolving door? You know, what are the pros? What are the cons with it? I would just like to have an update on that before 6 months. I think 6 months in the current crisis is a long time, given how important this initiative is. Thank you.
Well, I think 6 months is probably a reasonable amount of time to allow this to actually become part of the daily business. But I'm sure officers will be able to give us an email briefing prior to that as we go forward, and we can arrange for that to happen. But
thank you. That would be helpful. That would be helpful.
The report will come back as stated in the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Jo, do you want to comment, or can I move on, please?
Move on.
Thank you. Rona, please.
Actually, it's been covered by the conversation with Councillor Reynolds and the comment by Malcolm Metcalf and the input from Angie. MPs and MSPs were briefed by Dr Thompson on Friday as to the soft landing that we're approaching at the moment with the national approach to unscheduled care, and I think when we get to the appropriate time, our paper on all the minor injury units would be the most appropriate way to proceed. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you very much for that. So with that, can we note that that piece, please, and with the action of an email briefing at the appropriate time around Operation Home First, I'm happy to pursue with Councillor Reynolds anything else, and we'll then move to item 5 on our agenda, which is the Chief Officer's report. Mrs Wood, please.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to the written information that I've provided to the IJB, if I could, Chair, if I could just make some verbal updates. Obviously, as I've said already today, I think we're all aware that the COVID situation and our response to that is a fairly fast-moving beast. And therefore any information that I write down does risk being out of date by the time that it's actually published. So we know that we continue to experience community transfer of COVID in Aberdeenshire, and this obviously increases the risk to all of our services. The IJB have already been briefed on our most recent outbreaks and the management of them, and I would like to take this opportunity to formally thank all of our teams and all of our partners who have put in an extraordinary amount of work over the last few weeks and months, but particularly in the last few days, to manage these situations. This has also led to most of our teams working over a 7-day period, so hence I would just make the IJB aware that we may be a little bit more difficult to contact over the weekdays, because we are having to cover both Saturday and Sunday with probably our usual weekday responses at the moment. I would also just like to stress that all of the processes that we have in place are designed to minimise the risk of COVID transmission, and this becomes more and more important and more challenging as that level of community transmission continues. The need for compliance in all of our communities is at its greatest and will be at its greatest in the coming months, and I would encourage all of us to use those facts, principles and to promote them whenever we have an opportunity to do so. We need to encourage this in all of our communities, both to protect our most vulnerable but also our teams and the services that we have. I would also like to use this opportunity for the IJB to acknowledge some of the significant restrictions and indeed sacrifices that our teams are making in order to keep their service users safe and our services ongoing. But I do want to use this opportunity to also focus on some of the really positive things that we continue to develop. Within my Chief Officer report, there is significant information about how we've used digital initiatives through this time and to think about the future. I would hope, by the way, that that Erica's pulled this piece within the Chief Officer's report together, you'll start to see how we're trying to thread these things together to make a more digitally enabled communities, service users and services, rather than a group of very discrete digital initiatives. And I think we've still got work to do there, but I hope we're starting to see some of that. I would also use this opportunity just to mark the momentous event that is, in fact, the beginning of the vaccination programme. So, again, incredibly fast-moving agenda. We only approved vaccines last week, I believe, and we're already starting to see the delivery starting. I understand today that we are expecting our first delivery of vaccine next week, next Monday, the 14th. In Scotland, we have very much focused around vaccination of vaccinators and peer-to-peer delivery. And we will be planning, we have been planning before those clinics, and we're now moving those into action. We expect that additional and other vaccines will be available in the coming days, and again we have plans in place to be able to deliver them as soon as we have clarity around what that supply is going to look like and who we're being directed by the Scottish Government to look as our priority groups. If I can return then to the written submission that you have before you, we've also included on this update some information around the opiate substitution therapy that's been upscaled and delivered at speed within the prisons. We have been commented upon that we've delivered this and embraced this in a very positive way, and our teams in the prison have worked really hard to deliver this in a different way, and that's been acknowledged. And perhaps, Councillor Ross, there's a very brief update there around some of the Operation Home First, focusing very much on the frailty pathway, but again, happy to deliver that further briefing should it be required. I'll maybe stop there, Chair, but happy to take questions on any of those items. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I have Joyce, please.
Thank you, Chair. Angie, I'd just like to ask, I think there's a great deal going on at the moment, and I would heartily back all your staff for the wonderful work that's going on. We keep hearing anecdotal information about there being people who are unable to access digital services, and I wondered if there's any work ongoing to actually get some hard data, either on groups or areas where that is particularly prevalent, because instead of just hearing about the theory that this is a problem, I'd like to know where and how in order that we can solve it in the future.
Chair, if I may, I like you, Joyce, have heard of that anecdotal information. I would need to go and check with colleagues to see if that hard data has been collected and where it's being collected. I am aware there's considerable work ongoing with council colleagues, and I think that the benefit of the way that the IJB and the partnership is very much embedded within the council family as well means that we can join up an awful lot of this. So work that's ongoing around that connectivity in our communities, we are absolutely around that and involved within it. So if I could take that as an action, Joyce, I will caveat every action I take today, I'm afraid, with the capacity component of that. So if I could take that action away, I'm more than happy to find out about it if you can be tolerant of what our timescales may be around that. Thank you.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much, Angie.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ross, please.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, Angie. First of all, thank you to yourself, to Mr. Ramsey and all the staff of the Health and Social Care Partnership and NHS Grampian for what they're doing during the COVID crisis for everybody. It is very much appreciated. My first point is regarding page 18, the digital devices for care home residents and social care clients. I was wondering whether it would be possible to provide iPads or tablets to be given to those in sheltered housing too. The reason I'm saying this is there is a knitting group in Braemar called Knitwits who are very successful, who have been working with people during the current crisis, but people in sheltered housing are unable to join in because they don't have the digital infrastructure to do so. So they have been isolated. So I was wondering, I know that iPads have been provided to care homes, etc., and community hospitals, but I was wondering if that would be able to be rolled out to sheltered housing too. Thank you.
Chair, if you want me to comment, obviously sheltered housing is
just carry on. Yeah, I understand that is that's been worked on. So
I mean, obviously sheltered housing is not within the remit of the IJB or the partnership, but as Chair has noted, I believe we're working to do that, but as I say, it's not within my gift or the IJB's gift at the moment.
There is a project through the Housing Service, Councillor Ross, where those very issues are being addressed. So
okay, thank you.
That's been taken forward.
Thank you.
You said you had 2 questions. Is that?
I know. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rona, please.
I suppose I'm constantly looking for something that's not COVID related in my life, and therefore I feel we should highlight the opiate substitution work in the prison. The prison is one of our responsibilities, and if we're doing something that makes life more bearable and they can have a better life as they go forward, then so much the better. So thank you for that work.
Thank you very much indeed.
Chair.
Sorry, on you go, Mrs.
Sorry,
Wood,
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rona. I think you're absolutely right. It is good for us to focus on things that are non-COVID, and I'm afraid I will make every opportunity of, as I say, every initiative that's come through the COVID door, because this has come through a COVID door. So certainly I know that the team is working really hard to say, actually, if this is a better system for those within our prison estate, then how can we make sure that we carry on in that post-COVID era? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other indications. Members have any other questions for Mrs. Wood? I think the report before us is very comprehensive, and the verbal update that you've given us is very much appreciated. And I think we all acknowledge and appreciate the capacity issues that you do have around, not just with yourself, but for the team as a whole, and the teams that are delivering the services also. So can I, on behalf of us all, and others have said this, but just pass on the board's thanks and appreciation for everything that they are doing under very difficult and challenging circumstances, and I am aware that people are going above and beyond, as they always do, to ensure that our service users can get the support and the care that they need at when they're at their most vulnerable. So please pass on our thanks to every single member of the Health and Social Care Partnership teams across Aberdeenshire, because what they're doing is very, very much appreciated. Thank you.
Chair, it's Dennis here. Before we move on, if
Correct.
I may,
Yep. Surely.
if I may, and you know, I think your statement is something that I think we would all share. But in particular, I just wanted to commend Joe for keeping us informed and up to date with the various briefings we're getting and communications, which is keeping us maybe one step ahead of the media sometimes. But I think we need to. Well, I would certainly like to acknowledge the briefings we are getting from Joe. It's very much appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you also very much for raising that. It was remiss of me not to mention that specifically, I suppose, but I think Joe's very much part of the team. But it is appreciated, and it is good to have everybody up to date with what's happening in the local area. So thank you very much for that, Dennis. Can I just confirm that our guest is Martin? We have a guest dialed in. Is it yourself, Martin?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, yes it is. Yep, yeah, it's Martin.
Sorry about that, Chair. Yes, I had difficulty because of the issue with the emails. I didn't get the correct number for dialing in initially. Thank you.
All right, okay, but thank you for that, Martin. We just wanted to be sure it was yourself. Thank you for that. Okay, colleagues, then can we note and endorse the Chief Officer's update, please, and move then to the Chief Social Work Officer annual report. And pleased to welcome Mr. Ramsey in his role as our Chief Social Work Officer. Mr. Ramsey, please.
Many thanks, Chair, and firstly thank you for the opportunity to present my third annual report as Chief Social Work Officer. Again, this report paints a picture of a social work and social care service which performs well across a range of functions, and most importantly for members of this board, this includes adult social work services. In 2019-20, staff in all social care and social work services have continued to demonstrate their commitment to supporting and protecting some of the most vulnerable people in our community with the aim of improving lives. As members know, social work and social care services provide support and offer protection to some of the most vulnerable groups in society. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed many aspects of day-to-day life, and it's testament to the resilience of social work and social care staff that the needs of so many across Aberdeenshire have been met during this pandemic. Within the report, there are a number of areas of good practice highlighted, and year on year I am seeing social work and social care services evolve and, most importantly, continue to maintain a clear focus on improving the lives of adults, families, unpaid carers and children. The last 9 months have been challenging on many fronts, but I've been amazed at the ingenuity and creativity of the service, and I look forward to seeing new emerging practice across all social work functions. I also look forward to see new emerging practice over the coming months and years including further embedding of self-directed support across all social work functions, the development of a transitions policy, including guidance for young people and their families. And I also look forward to more collaborative work within NHS mental health and learning disability services to improve the support available to children and young people. Whilst this report describes social work and social care services across Aberdeenshire positively, it is important to acknowledge individual practitioners, wider teams, services and partner agencies are continuing to contend with challenges associated with COVID-19, but there are also pressures associated with budget constraints, greater and more complex needs, growing complexity of legislative and statutory tools, maintaining professional identity, and greater use of thresholds and eligibility criteria. Within this landscape, it is important the core principles of social work, such as social justice, human rights, collective responsibility, and respect for diversities, are not compromised or undermined. The pandemic has shone a light on both the fortitude and resilience of society, but has also highlighted aspects where change is necessary. Importantly, I would like to commend staff who work within social work and social care services for the support and protection they have provided to our vulnerable children, families, adults and unpaid carers throughout 2019-2020, and more recently through the COVID-19 pandemic. In Aberdeenshire, we have a workforce which responds with professionalism, empathy and kindness. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge the assistance from colleagues in providing information and thank them for their support throughout the writing of this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Ramsey, and I would invite comments or questions from members. Sorry,
Chair,
Dennis, yes, thank you.
Thanks very much for the report, and again, quite comprehensive. I'm just wondering, in terms of the SDS, you made reference to it, and I'm just wondering, has there been a significant increase in the uptake in terms of obviously giving additional choice for people in terms of the care that they wish to purchase? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I think we still have a long way to go in relation to self-directed support. I think we've made reasonable progress over the last few years and since the legislation was put in place. However, I think there's aspects of self-directed support that continue to, I suppose, frustrate me somewhat in terms of the some of the administrative processes and the bureaucracy around about how self-directed support is provided. The core principles, as you know, are choice and control, and I think we still have some way to go to enable practitioners to work in a really choice and control centred way, and a really, I suppose, relationship-based approach to practice. We're not there yet, and I hope over the coming months and years we will be able to create a better environment for practitioners, service users and their families. The government is also working on self-directed support going forward, and we are part of that process. We're able to influence it, but I do think it's one aspect of work across social work and social care that, whilst, as I say, we've made good progress, I think there's still some way to go.
Thank you very much. Do you believe that the with COVID, it's exacerbated any progress that you may have made during this time?
Yeah, undoubtedly. The focus throughout the pandemic, as I said in my introduction, has very much been around about protection, And I think that's absolutely been the right approach. However, I think what that does do is it tends to impede the ability of that kind of relationship-based approach, which in terms of the time that practitioners need is probably a little bit more than what they have at the moment, in terms of just ensuring that that kind of protection is in place and that immediate support is in place. I do hope that the pandemic, and as we move towards the vaccination programme, that what we will see is that a lot of learning will come out of it, and I hope that practice going forward and change going forward will come from that. And certainly I'm really keen that SDS is a central component of that.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Dennis. Fiona, please.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, the camera doesn't seem to be working at the moment.
Don't worry, it's fine. We can hear you. Good morning, Fiona.
Yeah, there we go. Just to say thank you. It was a very good report from Mr. Ramsey, and it's from a carer's perspective. It's good to have acknowledgement of the current transactional nature of social work and the changes that are required in the delivery of social care, which is SDS, but it's also unpaid carers. And I would just always reiterate that we have to remember the role of unpaid carers in all this. But my main question was about the transition. Do we have any timescales attached to the production of a policy and how this is actually going to be done? It's just in case, you know, all the time, if you look through all the financial reports, all the time it makes reference to the issue of huge budgets coming from children's services, coming into adult services and into the IJB's remit. There seems to be a massive discrepancy in terms of interpretation of support from children's services to the IJB. So it's just, please, is there going to be a timescale? Because a lot of us have been waiting for a very long time.
Thank you, Fiona, for that question. The actual process we've set up has just actually started. So I've met with colleagues from Children's Services and Adult Services. What we're going to do is we're going to map out a timeline for that. I am really keen that we get that done next calendar year, and that we have a policy agreed through the necessary committees, and we also have some really supportive guidance that goes alongside that. I'm also really keen that that's not a process that's done in just the practitioners forum. We need to ensure that we use the expertise and experience of care experienced individuals, and that includes unpaid carers as well. I think ultimately the policy that will come out of this, I hope, is something that is truly marks out a route forward, which ensures that the experience of young people and unpaid carers going through the transitions process is supportive, and actually delivers positive outcomes. I think the financial issue is a transactional part of that, which I think should just be should follow that actual transitions the experience, and I would hope that, you know, further discussions through Children's Services and Health and Social Care Partnership will make sure that that doesn't get in the way of actually ensuring that the right support is put in place. Thank you.
Okay, Fiona, do you want to come back?
Yeah, well, only look to the future with hope. So yeah, looking forward to that actually this will be co-produced, because that would be a real change going forward.
Yeah, that's certainly an indication that Mr. Ramsey has given that it will be a co-production, and that lived experience will be part and parcel of the work that's taken forward. So thank you very much indeed for the question and also for the response, Mr. Ramsey. Joyce, please.
Thank you. Yes, I thought it was a very comprehensive report. The one thing it makes clear is that in future there's quite a lot to be done with the outcomes and the impacts of COVID and the isolation, mental health issues. And I am concerned about the staff. We have good staff retention at the moment within Aberdeenshire. And I wonder if there's a programme in place to ensure that over the next 18 months or so we're supporting the staff in the most appropriate ways. And allowing them time and development and space to ensure their well-being.
Mr. Ramsey?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. I would fully endorse what you said. I think the staff over the last 9 months have adapted to a different world, but that world has far more stress than the world was before. Staff have gone above and beyond the duty, beyond duty. However, I am concerned that as we come out of the pandemic, that the last 9 months, 12 months, or whatever it will be at that point, will have taken a toll on people. So we do have mechanisms, supportive mechanisms in place, both through the management structures that we have, but also through alternative routes. Psychological hub and other supportive measures. There's a report going to the Clinical and Adult Social Work Governance Committee tomorrow, which outlines some of the support that is in place. So I think that will be helpful to have it on the agenda there and to have that conversation. Thank you.
Okay, Joyce,
Yeah,
do you want to
it's
come
Martin
back?
Mackay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
okay.
very much.
Just checking with Joyce, Martin.
I'm happy with that. Look forward to seeing the results.
Okay, thank you very much. Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add into Ian's reply there, on top of the local staff support, the Scottish Government has initiated a workforce, a national workforce programme to build a national support response for not staff but the entire workforce, so, and the representatives around that group from all sectors, including the third sector. So that's an ongoing programme I sit on for Unison, and that's to model the current programme in the NHS in England, and it's going to model that staff resilience and mental health support programme.
Okay, thank you very much for that additional information, Martin. That's very helpful. It just starts to join things up. Mr. Ramsey, you want to come back?
Yeah, I think that's an important point. That just an additional comment around this, that when we speak about the pandemic and the workforce, I think we generally refer to people that are directly involved in health and social care services and employees of various different organisations. I do think it's important to acknowledge the impact that the pandemic is having on unpaid carers, and we've spoken about self-directed support, but also the personal assistants, because those are key individuals in the overall support for vulnerable people, and it's important that we have a really clear consideration for how those individuals are supported going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Chair, could I make a comment, please?
Yes, certainly, Sue.
Yeah, thank you for the report, Mr. Ramsey. I was involved a few weeks ago in a Zoom meeting with Andrew Bowie, the MP for Kincardine, that area, and talking about adult social care during the crisis and particularly with people with dementia. I made some inquiries. People know I'm involved with this, and I have to say a very, very good picture has emerged of the support people have had during this time from adult social care in their care. This is particularly unpaid carers with care of their relatives during this difficult time. Two particular people I spoke to in confidence, and both their relatives had in fact to move into care, one to a nursing home, one to a care home, and the support they received from your teams and from the teams who were helping them, as well as those within the care home and the nursing home, was exemplary, and they felt very much supported during this time, which was very difficult for them. So I'd just like to pass that on to you, and please pass that on to your teams. It was much appreciated.
I'll pass on. Thank you.
That's really good to know, Sue, and thank you for sharing that.
Well, it was a very interesting meeting as well, because it was nice to tell Mr. Bowie about what was actually happening on the ground to real people.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Can I ask Mrs. Wood, please, to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian, for this report. I am shocked and horrified. It's a year since we last looked at a Chief Social Work Officer report, and I'm also quite shocked when I think about just how much the world has changed through that time. So if I could, on behalf of the Health and Social Care Partnership, I'd like to formally thank Ian for all of his contributions in his role as Chief Social Work Officer, and his personal support to me as Chief Officer. I am continually struck when I attend a number of national meetings at how disconnected the Chief Officer role and the Chief Social Work Officer role can be. I don't think that's absolutely not the case in Aberdeenshire, and I think a lot of that is due to Ian's professionalism and his real view of how the social work profession sits within the partnership. We all know that within Aberdeenshire we have incredibly strong integrated teams. I think it's my belief, and I hope Ian shares this belief with me, that the strength of an integrated team is the strength of the professionals within it, and ensuring that each profession maintains that level of professionalism. And I think the ability to draw on that social work professional guidance, advice and input through this last few months has been invaluable to all the work that we do. I think the other real strength we have in Aberdeenshire, and absolutely acknowledging Fiona's comments that we've got work to do, is the strength of the relationship with Children's Services. I think particularly the contribution from the Head of Service, from Lee Jolly herself, and also from the wider Education and Children's Services, Lawrence and his team, and indeed the Education and Children's Services Committee. I think we continue to grow, we continue to develop those relationships, and I think we're only stronger for it. So if I could, Chair, just use this opportunity to give my personal thanks to Ian, but also to the huge contribution that the social work profession makes to our business day in, day out, and hopefully to improve the outcomes of all that we work with. Thank you, Chair.
I think you've very eloquently summed up everybody's view, I think, about the relationships and the partnerships and the professionalism across all teams. And I'd actually jotted down the word professionalism that I was going to sort of use in my summing up, but I think you've much more eloquently summed up than I probably would have done. And I think that you echo the thoughts of all of us, because certainly it's clear that the relationships and the culture that have been developed in Aberdeenshire across all partnerships are certainly, I think, second to none. And whilst we're not complacent and there's work to do, I do think that you all demonstrate a huge added value to our residents and communities across Aberdeenshire. And again, I think that the word is professionalism that is shown is incredible, actually, and we should be encouraging that and supporting that and encouraging people to grow, or helping people to grow. It goes back to the point that Joyce made earlier about supporting the staff and making sure that their needs are met as well. But actually, we're incredibly lucky here. So thank you all very much indeed. And thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Did you want to come back finally?
I'd just say that I think this is fundamentally about relationships. As I say, we're not there yet. We will continue to evolve, but we do have incredibly robust teams, and largely the culture that we have in Aberdeenshire is about supporting individuals, supporting communities, and I think our emphasis on multidisciplinary teams, multi-agency working, I think really sets the tone. Whilst I think professions are important, I think ultimately it's the contribution of all professions in a multidisciplinary forum which actually makes the difference. And I think we're well placed moving forward. So I'd just like to thank Angie and for the kind words, but it is a team effort. I'm just one part of it. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. So with that, colleagues, can we agree the recommendations on our papers from the Chief Officer's report, please?
Agreed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. We'll move then, colleagues, to item 7 on our agenda, which starts on page 48, and it's a finance update as of September 2020. And I would ask Mr. Sharp if you'd like to introduce this report, please. Thank you, Mr. Sharp.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So this is the third update for this financial year, and it covers the position up to the end of September, so we're halfway through the financial year. It also includes an updated forecast for the year as a whole. Section 6 of the report covers the impact of COVID-19 on our finances. We continue to incur quite large extra costs in areas such as PPE, sustainability payments to social care providers, extra staffing, and the loss of income in some areas. Our total projection for additional costs of COVID-19 remain 11.7 million for this year, and we've incurred about 5.5 million for the first half of the year. We will continue to update our cost projections as the year progresses, and the estimates at this point don't currently include an assessment of the costs that we will incur supporting the COVID vaccination programme between now and the end of March. But as you've heard earlier, measures now being put in place to kick that off, and the costs could be significant. The COVID costs don't appear as a budget variance because we're assuming that they will be fully funded by the Scottish Government. To date, we've received just over 7 million of funding from the Scottish Government in respect of our actual costs for the first quarter and a proportion of our projected costs for the rest of the year. And we expect further allocations to be made in December and January. The table at the top of page 51 of the report shows our financial position at the end of September. And this highlights that we've recorded an underspend against budget of 1.56 million at the halfway point of the year. And this continues the financial trend from earlier months. The main factors which have led to the underspend are a lower level of costs for some of our social care services where capacity was reduced earlier in the year. We've also had some savings due to reduced capacity in community hospitals around things like bank staffing. And we've also seen savings in areas like travel and training costs. We do still have some pressures in some areas of our budget. For example, we're continuing to use a high level of expensive locums in our mental health services. And we are now seeing an overspend on a GP prescribing budget due to significant price increases for some drugs. The table at paragraph 710 of the report shows our forecast financial position for the year as a whole. And this highlights that we're forecasting an underspend of just over 1.3 million at the end of March 2021. Most of this underspend relates to social care services and reflects the lower level of cost that we've seen for the first half of the year. One recent issue that's taken place since the paper was drafted was the announcement by the First Minister a couple of weeks ago of a £500 pay award for staff working in health and social care services. The Scottish Government is still to issue the detail on how this will actually be implemented, but we have been told to assume in financial terms that it will be fully funded. There are a couple of ongoing risks that we need to manage as the year progresses. The one I would continue to flag up is around GP prescribing costs, where we see some significant increases in the unit costs of some drugs. This is a national issue and is caused by a number of factors, including supply issues and changes in prescribing habits to deal with the impact of COVID. The impact of Brexit on drug prices is also still unknown at this stage. In terms of savings, we had a savings programme which was planned to achieve 5.5 million of savings, which we set with the budget at the start of the year. There's been limited progress on this because of the capacity of our managers in delivering COVID priorities. Details of the likely achievement of savings are given at Appendix 4 on page 60, and we now estimate that out of the 5.5 million target, we'll achieve about 3 million this year. So in summary, it's steady as she goes at the halfway point of the financial year, and I draw your attention to the recommendations on page 48 and very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got Dr. Metcalf, please.
Thanks so much, Chair. Alan, a very I mean, you're talking here of a budget, I think, of £345.5 million, so it's absolutely huge. So a couple of questions. So the underspend we've got at the moment is 1.5 million, whereas with our targeted cost savings we're meant to be about 5.5 million. So does that actually mean at the halfway point we're actually still £1 million overspent in terms of the position where we want to be?
Thanks, Malcolm. No, the cost savings were to get us to a balanced budget. So the underspend that we're reporting is net of the cost savings. So it's a true underspend at this stage.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And the other thing was, and it's probably strays into item 8, is that you've given some detail about, you've taken some of the highlights of certain subsections where there's been a significant under or overspend. But I just wonder if it comes to the point where we need to have some sort of discussion about whether the various divisions of the budget are actually need to be changed. In other words, they need to be remodeled to perhaps the current situation.
Yes, Malcolm, that's I think it probably does stray into the next item, but that's one of the areas that we will be looking at when we set the budget for next year in terms of realigning budgets where there are significant overspends or underspends. One of the issues that we need to take account of in doing that is that taking a view on whether these variances are temporary in nature purely because of COVID or whether they're longer term in nature. So that's an exercise that we will be going through for next year's budget.
Thanks very much, Alan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Do we have any other comments or questions for Mr. Sharp, please? I see no one.
Sure, it's Dennis here.
Sorry, on you go, Dennis.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, Alan, a very comprehensive and detailed summary. With regard to the overspending and prescribing of the drugs, and I know it's a national thing, but I just wonder if you're able to give us any indication of what is happening nationally in terms of trying to, well, I don't know, maybe influence or even try and resolve, because it seems to me that we're seeing significant hikes in some of the drug prices, and I know that that's got an impact on whether or not GPs have got to look for alternatives in their prescribing habits. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for the question. Yes, it is a national issue, and CFOs are working with the Scottish Government at the moment to make representations that additional funding should be allocated to IJBs for the spikes that we're seeing in prescribing costs at the moment. Scottish Government are taking the view that they want to try and split those additional costs between what we can absolutely see is COVID related and what is not COVID related and probably would have happened anyway. And of course the government only want to fund the COVID bit. So those discussions are continuing at the moment, but I am hopeful that we will get some support for our prescribing position by the end of the year for the COVID impact.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other indications, so can we look at the recommendations, please, on page 48? And it is to consider and comment on the financial position set out in the report and within the appendices, to approve the budget adjustments detailed in Appendix 3, and consider the progress towards achieving the savings programme in Appendix 4. Can we agree those recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay, I'll take silence as an agreement. That's fine. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to Mr. Sharp and to all the team for managing the budget in these challenging times. So thank you. It's much appreciated. Colleagues, do you wish to continue to the next item or take a break, or do you want to complete item 8 and then we'll take a short break? Continue with item 8 and then break?
That would be good. That would be good.
That's fine. Thank you very much. So item 8 then is the Aberdeenshire Integration Joint Board Financial Outlook and Outline Plan. And again, can I just go back to Mr. Sharp, please, for an introduction? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's me again. So the purpose of this paper is to provide you with an update on how things are shaping up for the next financial year, 2021-22, in advance of the IJB setting a balanced budget once we get into 2021. It's worth stressing that the Scottish Government budget has been set for the 28th of January, so a lot of the key assumptions on which we base our budget are not known at this time. These include items like pay awards, funding uplifts for NHS Grampian and the Council, uplifts to the National Care Homes contract, and a forward look on GP prescribing costs. So for the purposes of this paper, I've made estimates based on the latest intelligence. The other significant area where there is much uncertainty is regarding the level of continuing COVID costs for next year, as many of the costs that we're currently incurring will continue beyond 31st of March. Our initial estimate, based on some high-level national assumptions, is that over 3 million of our COVID costs will be incurred next year, and these are detailed at the top of page 65. For the purposes of setting a budget for 2021-22, the Scottish Government have asked us again to assume that these costs will be separately funded by them, so they're almost to the side of our normal budget setting process. This then leaves us to consider changes to our own core budget, and these are summarised on table 1 on page 62. We have carried forward pressures of 3.5 million, comprising of savings that were planned for this year, but that we haven't made because of COVID. And there are also some one-off, non-recurring savings that we have made this year, which won't repeat in 21-22. Pressures and new commitments of 8.2 million are detailed in table 2 on page 63. And these are for pay awards and uplifts to GP prescribing and commission service budgets. So they're the normal inflationary pressures that we would have. We're assuming an uplift in funding of 3 million from NHS Grampian, based on a pro rata share of the uplift that the Health Board will receive. At the moment, we're not making any assumption on the funding uplift from Aberdeenshire Council, as the Council is still going through its detailed budget setting process. So if you put all the elements together of cost increases and funding uplifts, that gives us an initial financial gap of 8.7 million for next year. And that will reduce by whatever funding uplift earned by Aberdeenshire Council. An 8.7 million gap is just under 2.6% of the total IJB budget, and means that the financial challenge facing us next year is quite significant. Section 6 of the report outlines the high-level approach for identifying savings and budget realignments for next year. And this involves progressing planned schemes from this year, which have been paused, realigning budgets in those areas which are likely to see continuing reductions in capacity over the next year, which I think was Malcolm's question, and reviewing areas that have had long-standing underspends. It also involves looking at the use of our asset base and progressing service redesign proposals where feasible. The detail around all of these areas still needs to be worked up, and we will aim to do that by the next IJB meeting in February. The recommendations on page 61 of the paper I would draw your attention to, and the key one is, at this point, is that I can't provide you with assurance that the IJB will be able to set a balanced budget for next year without further development of our savings programme between now and March. So that's where we are in terms of our estimates for next year. I'm very happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. And can I just ask members to ensure that their mics are off, please, if they're not contributing? I did send you a little note, Dennis. Thank you. Thank you very much. Colleagues, do you have any questions or comments for Alan based on what you've heard and what is in the report? Joyce, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Alan, I'd like to thank you for a very realistic picture of where we are and what faces us going forward. And I think it's important that we take this on board and are not afraid to have some very difficult conversations that will be challenging for everyone in order to be able to progress this and make it feasible to at least achieve some of the savings that we have to achieve. So thank you for the work of your team. I think it's a very good piece of work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? No? Okay, on that basis then, recommendations, colleagues, are on page 61. But again, I'd like to echo those thanks to Alan and the officers across health and social care for this, as Joyce has said, very frank outlook in terms of our financial situation. And we will, I take it, be going to indicate once IJB has agreed the recommendations, we will send a note to the chief executives of both NHS Grampian and Aberdeenshire Council to share this report with them as well. I think that would be helpful to do so. So with that then, colleagues, the recommendations are to acknowledge that based on information currently available and consistent with prior year estimates, Aberdeenshire IJB is not able to provide assurance on its ability to deliver a balanced financial position for 21-22 without further development and agreement on savings and budget realignment proposals. To discuss the requirement to deliver 8.7 million of savings in 2021-22 to close the financial gap, assuming the COVID costs are fully funded based on existing assumptions and inherent risks, and consider that the financial gap will increase if an additional projected £3.2 million of COVID costs provisionally identified for next year are not funded by additional funding from the Scottish Government. Can we agree those recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much, and the appropriate actions will be taken following this meeting today. So thank you very much indeed. Now, colleagues, it's 11:10. Would you like a 5 or 10 minute break? Any suggestions? 10 minutes, Dr. Metcalf? Okay, so we'll resume business at 11:20, and can we put the recording off now, please? And we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Produce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Members will recall that in December last year, the board approved our strategy across Aberdeenshire for learning disability, Be All You Can Be, and that was launched in March. At that meeting, the board asked us to come back with a bit more detail, and that's what we have today. Now, in a moment, I'll hand to Matt Carroll to talk us through that. The only other thing I would probably say is that I'm obviously very wary at the moment, particularly this week, of bringing anything that has got really specific dates to it. But some of this work we have managed to keep going throughout the pandemic, and therefore it only seemed reasonable that we took this forward with perhaps a general idea of priorities rather than some specific dates. But Chair, with your permission, I'll ask Matt to say just a tiny bit more. Thank you.
Thank you, and you're welcome, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So as Mark said, at December's IJB last year, you had asked us to come back with a more comprehensive action plan, which is what we have done. As you can see, the delivery plan follows the strategic priorities that were identified and agreed upon for the strategy, that people with learning disabilities will feel well, will feel involved, will feel valued and feel supported. The strategic priorities are also closely linked to the strategic outcomes in Scotland's learning disability strategy, the Keys to Life. The plan itself contains 14 projects that are being prioritised over the 5-year lifespan of the LD strategy. Each project has a lead, clear deliverables and outcomes to evidence our progress, and the delivery of these projects will be overseen by the LD Strategic Delivery Group. Work has already begun, supported by the Strategic Delivery Group, to progress many of the projects. In terms of performance information, The performance information will be a mixture of quantitative and qualitative data and will follow the principles of the new approach to performance reporting as agreed by IJB, and this will further be developed under the oversight of the Strategic Planning Group. This will ensure there's a consistency of reporting across the various partnership strategies, but with a particular focus on outcomes-based performance measures that demonstrate more clearly the actual impact of the actions we are taking forward through the strategy. Reports on the progress against the strategy will be built into IJB performance reporting timetable for 2021 and beyond. We propose to review the strategy and provide a report to the IJB on a regular basis, but we will also report progress through the Strategic Planning Group and the Programme Board. So with that, I'll invite any comments or questions.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Metcalf, do you want to come in? I just wonder if Dr. Metcalf's got connection issues. In the meantime, could I ask Jan to check if Dr. Metcalf's connected? Okay, Dr. Metcalf has explained that he can't rejoin at the meeting at the moment, but he's going to keep trying. So if somebody could just assist with that, please, and then I'll go to Ines, please, for a question.
Hi, good morning. I think obviously the proviso is everybody knows that my background in the year Oakhaken 1 was in learning disability, and my question is really coming from the staff is about their involvement in the process, because they tend to be at the front line of questions from parents, carers, throughout the process, and it is their involvement in taking things forward. Now, obviously, again, the other proviso is no one ever speaks to me when they're happy. So I tend to have a jaded view on life, not normally, and people only come to me with complaints when they feel they've not been involved rather than instructed and not included in that. And obviously the staff are key elements in the delivery of any strategy. They're the ones that take things forward. So it's really to ask what involvement have the staff had in shaping the strategy going forward?
Thanks, Ines. I can maybe come in and answer that question. The staff have been fully involved in the strategy. And the
Sorry, Laura, can you just explain maybe who you are?
Sorry, I'm Laura Tom, the Learning Disability Mental Health Manager for South Aberdeenshire, and support and chair the Strategic Delivery Group for the Learning Disability Strategy. My apologies. The Strategic Delivery Group is a multi-agency group, and there are members of staff on that group, as well as other representatives. The 14 project groups that we intend to deliver have designated leads, but again, the membership of those groups will be specific around staff or service users, carers, etc., depending on the outcome that the project aims to achieve. So staff have been fully involved in the process and will continue to be, as will carers and service users. Thank you.
Sorry to just be cheeky, just to say, what support are the staff being given to support the families that go to them, that element?
Mark, or do you want to come in? I see you indicated.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to emphasise what Laura said, our staff teams, as well as service users and families and wider stakeholders, were heavily involved in developing the strategy. It's one of the most successful engagements events I think we've undertaken in a long term. But certainly I'm happy to have discussions with Ines off table. I would be happy to open up a seat for Unison on the strategy group if that would be useful. Very happy to have those discussions. The more people that are involved in general terms, the better. It's not just our staff group, of course, because this is about influencing commission services as well, but very happy to discuss with Ines, and as I say, there's an offer there for a chair for Unison if that is appropriate and helpful.
I think that's a very helpful offer, Mark, and I'm sure Ines is nodding. and thumbs up, so we'll accept that offer. Can I just remind folks that this is the delivery plan, the strategy has been agreed. So can we please stick to the point that this is the delivery plan? We have already agreed the strategy earlier this year, so just to make that point. But Ines, I hope that you'll find that offer from Mark useful as an ongoing communication piece. So thank you for that. I've got John Tomlinson, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm standing in for Amy today. I think you've already mentioned that, but just so I'm a non-exec with NHS Grampian. I just want to come to the technology and overnight care and that particular project, because overall this looks a comprehensive set of delivery for the strategy, but that one is quite complex. So I just wondered if officers could say a bit more about respective capital costs along with revenue costs, because I can see the savings on revenue. I'm just wondering how that is funded. And then secondly, I'm just wondering about the specific proposals for that, because it is quite complex. Will those come back to the IJB or one of the committees, or will that just proceed and just get updates? Thanks.
Mark, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, John. As you well know, we always keep packages of care under review, and in terms of our assessments, they're very much asset-based in terms of people's strengths. SDS has reinforced that, but it's always been the case. It's specific to technology. We've been doing work for a number of years now, looking at how we can support people to be more independent, looking at how we can make smarter use of technology. We've been quite successful in terms of sharing what we traditionally call sleepover staff, and in some areas reducing sleepover staff. It's complicated, it's sensitive. We could have gone quite quicker, but we were really keen to take service users and in particular family carers with us, or we could have gone quicker. We've been quite successful in taking people with us on that journey, etc. So that work will continue. I would say it's probably now quite routine. There's a couple of projects we're looking at the moment where there are clusters of individual flats or clusters of group homes where we can share care. So there are some financial drivers behind it, but it's also about increasing independence. As I say, we could go quicker, but I'm really keen to take people with us, and we continue to have that dialogue.
Okay, thank you. The second question was just about if that's all set in train, then that will just proceed. So there's no need to bring back specific proposals on that.
So we will certainly bring back. Well, it's up to members, but my anticipation would be that we will regularly bring to the IJB updates on this strategy, and we can certainly make specific reference to that. I know there has been some political interest in it, so we can certainly cover that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But the Angela MacLeod has been working with the IJB on performance management information. So the delivery plan or action plan will be captured under the new performance management system, and the IJB have been discussing that. So this will be taken forward within those parameters. Thank you for responding, Mark. And Dr. Metcalf's had connection problems, but can now hear and comment should he wish. And I'd go back to him and ask if do you have a comment to make at this point, Dr. Metcalf?
No, not at this point. Sorry, I'm struggling with the computer. I've got intermittent pictures, but at least I can hear you and I can see all the comments. Thanks.
That's fine. Thank you very much for that. I'll go then to Councillor Ross, please, then Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mark and Laura. Thank you for the report, which is interesting, and I think it's a comprehensive strategy, or delivery plan. My question is a bit of a plea. If there are any changes to physical resources in an area, and I'm thinking of one in particular in my ward, without I don't know of any changes to it, but could we please consult with the local community as well? Because resources in local communities can be quite precious, and I think you've taken everybody with you on this journey, and that's fantastic, and really, you know, the consultation's been really good, but I just think that the wider communities, if things change, will become concerned, and hairs can start running, if you see what I'm meaning.
Yep, thank you for that, Councillor Ross. I'm sure that will be taken into account. But in terms of the delivery plan, I think it's the way we're going to deliver the strategy. So, but take your point, and it's always local engagement is always appropriate, and it's certainly something that I think we're all very keen to ensure that the appropriate local engagement and communication is delivered where it's appropriate. So thank you for that reminder. Fiona, please.
Hi, thank you. Apologies, I've still got camera issues. Just in terms of the strategic delivery plan, it is partly a request that the frontline practitioners take a bit of ownership on the delivery of this, in as much that there is an accessible format of this delivery plan actually made available to those with learning disabilities, and that this is actually delivered directly to them. And also like a request that the issue of involvement continues to be an integral part of the actual assessment and also of review, that these questions about whether you're willing to and able to participate in the overall strategic aspirations of local authority are actually put to people in that language that they can understand. So, because that's not what's currently happening. It's like there is such a disparity between strategic work and actually what's happening on the ground. So it's just, again, going back as a request to management that, you know, there is a real push that conversation happens all the time.
Not sure if Laura has indicated. Laura, do you want to pick that up, or we go to Mark?
Yes, certainly I can pick that up. I think we have an accessible version of this called the Big List, which we initially presented to the IJB back in December last year, and this is the more detailed plan, so it is available, and we'll make sure that there's copies go round. One of the projects that we aim to deliver is around inclusive paperwork and reviews, because we've acknowledged that process needs to be ensuring that we are involving family members and service users and making it accessible and inclusive for them. I think we're coming on a long way with our accessible information, and I think the COVID pandemic, we've managed to produce accessible information and distributed that through our staff. So it's certainly an area that we are taking seriously and wish to improve upon. So thanks, Fiona.
Okay, Fiona, thank you.
Thanks for that response, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I don't have any other indications, so can we turn then to recommendations on page 69 of your pack? And we've been asked to consider and approve the Aberdeenshire Health and Social Care Partnership Learning Disabilities Strategic Delivery Plan. So can we agree that, please? And my thanks to all the officers that have been involved in getting us to this point, and we will monitor the delivery plan as we go forward. So can we agree, please?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that. And we'll turn then to item 10 on our agenda, which is making connections. And this is the dementia strategy for 2021 to 2030, the consultation feedback report. And Geraldine Fraser, Amy and Julia are with us. And Geraldine, do you want to introduce the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Amy Richards is also in the call. She's the Strategic Development Officer that's developed the strategy and the delivery plan, and Julia Wells is our Mental Health and Learning Disabilities Location Manager for Central, and she's also our Strategic Lead for Dementia for the partnership, so they'll come in just after me. The IJB considered the draft strategy in February this year, and we had intended to go out for a full consultation in March. This was delayed because of the pandemic, and instead a light touch assessment consultation was carried out in September. And you'll see from the report that the feedback is very much focused on the immediate needs of people with dementia, their carers and their families, and that's very much due to the impact of the lockdown and the social distancing that's been in place. So the priority actions which have been identified and are included in the delivery plan are very much short-term, immediate actions to address some of the most pressing issues. But I'll pass over to Amy and Julia just to say a bit more about that.
Thank you. I don't know, Amy, do you want to come in first, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Geraldine, for that initial introduction. Just to kind of move on to some of the more detail around this strategy and delivery plan that we're presenting together today. But one of the main kind of elements that we wanted to have within this plan was that it was fully accessible, and you will note that there is 3 versions available for the plan. We have an easy read version, a dementia friendly version, and we have the full accessible version there. We'd like to thank the Life Changes Trust for their support in developing the dementia friendly version, and especially to all who took part in developing the strategy overall and being involved in the consultation, especially those people living with dementia, unpaid carers and our workforce who were involved. As discussed at the IJB in February, we have 6 main priorities, and these have remained within this final version. They are being well informed, getting a diagnosis of dementia, knowing who to turn to, living well with dementia, accessing health and social care support at the right time, and caring for carers. As Geraldine mentioned, the feedback from our consultation indicated that all respondents were in agreement with these priorities, and specifically that 100% of the respondents were positive about the need to prioritise caring for carers and knowing who to turn to. I'm going to hand over to Julia just for a moment for the next section.
Hi, thanks Amy and thanks Chair. I am trying to get my video to work, but it doesn't seem to be working, so sorry, I'll keep trying. Oh, maybe that's okay. Don't worry, Julia. Is it okay? Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we've really considered at the moment is obviously the impact that the pandemic has had on people who are living with dementia in Aberdeenshire, and we recognise that we continue to probably be constrained by the pandemic placed on us for at least the next foreseeable future anyway. So as a result of that, we have just focused on a year delivery plan, which is on page 105 of the documents, and that's been aimed at specifically focusing on achievable priority areas within this context. The intention would be to report back to the IJB in 2022 with a 3-year delivery plan focused on the priorities then for 2022 to 2025. There's a range of performance measures that have been outlined within the delivery plan, which will enable us to track progress and report this. And some of the examples for 2021 to 2022 are to raise awareness within dementia around the importance and benefits of seeking a diagnosis of dementia, and that's really important. Because of the pandemic, dementia assessments have been slowed down in progress. Part of the problem with that was that there wasn't access to scanning, which has now been restarted, so hopefully that should now start to move, but we are looking at ways that we can try and manage that. We need to develop and monitor ongoing delivery of dementia post-diagnostic support to across services, work in partnership with those who have young onset dementia diagnosis to develop appropriate support and services, because their needs are slightly different from older people that have dementia, support the health and social care workforce to develop appropriate social support options for those with eligible needs in partnership with people living with dementia, and that would need to be in line with current COVID-19 limitations, and also support carers of people who live with dementia to have appropriate breaks from caring in line with COVID-19 restrictions that are in place. So I'll hand back over to Amy now. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to sort of finalise, we're really grateful to those who were unable to attend but have provided some additional feedback already in advance of the meeting. We did receive specific feedback emphasising the importance of having housing involvement throughout the pathway, and we're fully in agreement with this. Additional reference to the local housing strategy and Scotland's National Housing and Dementia Framework will be added before publishing, and we're ensure that colleagues from housing are particularly involved in the development of our post-diagnostic support model going forward. I just wanted to highlight for the information of the IJB that the Scottish Government are currently engaging on their dementia and COVID-19 recovery and transition plan, and we have had some already involvement in this. Prior to the pandemic, the Scottish Government had been preparing to engage on their fourth dementia strategy. However, their existing strategic direction will remain throughout 2021. The priorities and aspirations included within our strategy and our one-year delivery plan are in line with those of the Scottish Government, and we've provided feedback to them during an engagement session on what we think needs to be prioritised over 2021-22, which is in line with the priorities that we've presented to you today. Thank you.
Thank you all very much indeed for that very comprehensive overview of the report, and I'll just open it now for colleagues to ask any questions or make any comments. Joyce, please.
Thanks, Chair. I was just wondering if it's possible to get some sort of progress report prior to a year in January, because that seems like quite a long time if we're still having challenges, and given the pressure that's on carers, especially of people with dementia, I would really like to know before a year how we're getting on and how things are progressing, if diagnosis is speeding up, and indeed if there's been a higher level of diagnosis and if it's been worsened by the COVID situation.
Yeah, I would support that call, and I think we should get an update report back in 6 months, and then we take it from there. So happy to put that in place. Amy?
Yes, absolutely. It was just to kind of reiterate, similar to the learning disability delivery plan, that we will be continuing to report on the performance measures that are outlined as part of the strategic delivery plan. So that will also be part of it, and certainly the post-diagnostic support figures are included within that.
Thank you very much for that. Anne, please.
Thank you. I found it a very interesting report and a good report, so thank you very much. On page 84, it talks about the increase of digital technology to improve access to support for people living with dementia, and I would anybody that understands dementia will and yourselves will know that not everybody has the capacity to, who has dementia has the capacity to use technology, and neither do some carers. We've got people in the community who perhaps once could use technology, but as they progress on their dementia journey, that capacity can be lost. And if they have a carer who is not IT literate, then they are completely at a loss, really, with engaging with technology. So I wondered what kind of measures would be put in place to mitigate that. That was my first question. Can we have an answer, and then I'll come back with my next one, if that's all right, Chair, please.
Julia, you indicated that you'd come back on that.
Yeah, thanks, and I think that's a really, really valuable comment, and it's one that we're very aware of, because it is very, very challenging for people that have dementia. And you're right, obviously, you know, a lot of carers will be, family carers will also be older and not so familiar with technology. So there are a couple of things that are ongoing at the moment. We are trying to pilot an assessment tool that can be used over the phone, that has specifically been developed to try and do a memory assessment, kind of given those considerations of how people may find it difficult, you know, in those situations. I think the other thing is, and I can't remember the name of the charity, but Erica Skinner in her group with the virtual work she's doing at the moment, there is a charity who are there to support people and help them to access technology online. So that's one of the other things that we're also trying to explore at the moment as well. Thanks.
You wanted to come back, Councillor?
Yes, if I could, I'd be very interested to know the name of that charity, please, and other members of the IJB. May.
Get that off table then, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, post-diagnosis support. I think there's a lot of people out there in the community, some who have dementia who are known to social services and get support, but there are others, especially during the COVID-19 crisis, who are not known to social services and who are almost lost. So I think support through Aberdeenshire is erratic. In the Deeside corridor, I think it's relatively good, but on other parts of Aberdeenshire, it's not so good. And I would just welcome recognition of this, please. Thank you.
I'm not sure if officers would recognise that, but perhaps you could give us an update on what's happening across Aberdeenshire. So, Amy, can you speak to that, please?
Yes, absolutely. I just wanted to revisit Councillor Ross's first point quickly around technology and highlight the home-based memory rehab project, which our mental health OTs are currently involved in, which is supporting people with early onset diagnosis to use technology, specifically voice aids at home to support with independence, and that's a project that's been partially supported by some charity funding as well. On the post-diagnostic support, I think, our findings from engagement and consultation on this strategy was that, yes, there are inconsistencies, and certainly the aim is to develop a more consistent approach across the Shire. We've put in a new contract for our link worker support with Alzheimer's Scotland's just recently been implemented, and we've got a really strong multidisciplinary embedded team within the mental health nursing teams, which work together with Alzheimer's Scotland to deliver that. So there's a lot of progress we can make over the coming year with ensuring that consistency.
Thank you for that, Amy. Sorry, Councillor Ross. Julia, did you want to come back in at all?
No, sorry, it was just to say that I can get the details of the charity and send it on to you out with the meeting, so thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ross, you wanted to come back briefly, please?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that information, Amy. I would just make a plea for the carers out there who are looking after people during this COVID-19 crisis, because they are isolated, lonely, and they're trying to make the best of it on a day-to-day basis. But I would like to thank you for the report, because I thought it was an excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Councillor Reynolds, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I agree with Councillor Ross. I think this is an excellent report, and very much appreciated the work that the team is doing here. I wanted to say how much I also appreciate the reference in paragraph 6.2, the bullet point about working in partnership with those who have a young onset dementia diagnosis. To what extent is this building on existing work, and to what extent is it new work? I'm just curious in terms of that very significant bullet point, and just unpacking that slightly if you can. Thank you.
Amy?
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. It's a little bit of both. We had a workshop with colleagues in Aberdeen City looking at the support available across the area, and certainly have some indications from Murray as well. Because this is a small group of people with very specific needs, we need to ensure that we're having those direct conversations. So we had begun that prior to the pandemic. That's obviously been slightly delayed by circumstances, but we have connections with a group of people who I know will be willing to be involved from a young onset perspective, and we're keen to take that forward within the next year.
Thank you very much.
Julia, you wanted to come in as well?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just really to back up what Amy was saying. I think we really do recognise that the needs of people with young onset dementia, like I said earlier, is very different to those that have, are older, that have dementia. So it really is a very valuable piece of work. And as Amy says, it's a relatively new thing that we are looking at, but building on work that's been done. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that probably even at Scottish Government level, it is still very much in its infancy. So I think it's important just to acknowledge that as well. But it definitely is a work in process and something we need to focus on. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't see any other indications, colleagues. No other questions? I'll just pause for a moment.
Chair, can I just advise you that you're very quiet at the moment?
Oh, my apologies. Is that better?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any other indications then, and as others have said, our thanks to all of you for this excellent report. And I think, you know, dementia is a really important aspect of our adult social care, and very much appreciate all the work that's been done to get us to this point, and we'll look forward to being able to monitor the outcomes of the delivery plan, and also if we look at the recommendations, agree to report back in 6 months to the board rather than January 2022. So we can change that recommendation accordingly, please. And can members indicate that they agree to the publication and launch of Making Connections, the strategy for 2021 to 2030, and agree that a report comes back to this board in 6 months by way of an update on progress and development of the plan.
Agreed.
Agree that?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. And again, thank you, Amy and Julia and Geraldine, for the report. As others have said, it was excellent. So we look forward to the development of that. Thank you very much. Colleagues, go now to item 11 on our agenda, which is the Climate Change Declaration consultation. And I'm very pleased to welcome Joel Evans from Aberdeenshire Council, who is going to talk to us about this consultation and the paper in front of you. So Joel, you're most welcome, and I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you all for having me along. So as you can see, this report relates to the Climate Change Declaration, which Aberdeenshire Council approved in March this year. So just before taking you through the reports, I'll just recap on the Climate Change Declaration itself. So there were 3 broad areas where the Climate Change Declaration committed Aberdeenshire Council. The first was internally, so within our own operations, whether that's our buildings, our fleets, these kind of things, committed us to reducing our carbon emissions by 75% by 2030 and becoming net zero by 2045. And the reason these particular targets were picked was to be in line with the national targets that had been set for Scotland. So that was one aspect of the Climate Change Declaration. Another aspect was working externally, and we committed ourselves to working with other partners across the region to ensure that Aberdeenshire as an entire region reached a net zero target by 2045. So obviously, as you'll be well aware, working in the sort of the partnership world, that this will be things that we'll have to influence rather than directly control all of the time. So that's another area that the Climate Change Declaration commits us to. And then finally, the declaration did reinforce some existing commitments around the areas of things like biodiversity, circular economy, energy transition, and also making sure that any changes that happen in the region are fair as possible. So that's a summary of the Climate Change Declaration. And when this was approved by full council in March, there was a request that we, along with consulting internally within the directorates and services within the council, that we also consulted with area committees and also policy committees. And thanks to yourselves, an invite to the IJB today. And what we're trying to do is open up the floor for you to, as a board, to comment on the Climate Change Declaration and how you would like to see us as a council work towards the targets and commitments which it sets out. So this would be primarily within the area covered by you as a board, but more wide comments are also appreciated if there are any. So looking through the report, I'd just like to take you down to section 4.8. Which picks out some of the key areas that have been identified through conversations so far. The first one of those bullet points is roles and responsibilities, and how the roles and responsibilities of various directorates, of various positions, actually incorporate the targets set out in our climate change declaration. Organisational capacity building, procurements, which is obviously a huge issue and a big influence that we have, carbon budgets review, planning and regional vision, emissions planning for the council estates and all our buildings, and finance, investment and payback periods. So these are some of the key areas that have come up and upon which you may wish to comment. But just as I close and just open out for questions and so on, I think there are 3 key areas that have helped with other committees that I've attended as maybe focus points that the committee might like to start with commenting. The first one is just asking the committee or the board, are you supportive of the general move that we're making of ensuring that the responsibilities of this climate change declaration are taken up across the directorates and within the health and social care partnership more generally? The second point would be, how would you like to see us as a council engaging with the wider region, the Aberdeenshire region, whether it's through members or engaging with the community? How would you like to see us working with other stakeholders to ensure that the region meets a net zero target in 2045? And then a final question is just, how would you like us to keep ongoing links with yourselves as the IJB going forward as we go on through this process? This won't be a quick fix. It won't be something that we sort out in a couple of years. It will be something that's an ongoing piece of work embedding. So it would be good to get the thoughts of the board on as to how we keep in touch in general and follow your views in this. So that was all I wanted to say, briefly introducing the report and just giving some signals as to what areas might be good areas to start with in terms of comments and questions. But now happy to take any comments and questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Joel, for that introduction. I've got Glen, Councillor Reynolds first, please, and then Dr. Metcalfe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Joel, for the paper and your presentation. I've heard you speak previously on this, and I know the passion that you have and you demonstrate very well. Completely supportive of the declaration. I'd like to put my head above the parapet a little bit in relation to paragraph 4.8 and ask a question, Joel, concerning the emissions data that the council has. Can you, I'm not sure about this, and I might be incorrect, but that's why I'm seeking clarification. That data that we have in relation to emissions, does that include data from council housing when you're referring to the council estate? I wasn't sure, but if you could clarify, please. Thanks. You're on mute, Joel.
Apologies, Councillor Reynolds. Thank you very much for that question. So yes, that as you've picked out quite astutely, that's an area where there is a sense of we have an involvement in an area, but we don't necessarily have that recorded within, for example, our submissions to the Scottish Government, which we've just undertaken at the end of November. So at present, no, those emissions wouldn't come within our carbon budget scope or what we're reporting to the Scottish Government, but those would very much be something that we could influence and support. So this is going to be one of the areas, the tricky areas that we'll have to be working across the council to understand going forward is how do we draw a scope around our various targets. I know that there is a trend and an increasing recognition that local authorities and other organisations should be thinking about the emissions that come as part of their procurement. So whether it's procuring new buildings, new construction works, or just new resources used around offices or hospitals, anything like this, that there is a carbon impact in those that doesn't always get recorded in the direct emissions of an organisation. So yes, the short answer is no, that wouldn't be included in what we're recording at the moment, but it's something that we definitely have an influence on, and something that we will look to be working towards seeing how we can mitigate.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Metcalf, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Joel, this is obviously a very important piece of work, and I appreciate that, as you say, it's at a relatively early stage at the moment. But I think what I would like to do is to see a little bit more detail about things, because it will have connotations for social care and health. So, I mean, the background is a lot. I don't know if people are aware, but the current carbon emissions are about the 1880 level in the UK. So we've already made an appreciable change. About 20% of power is generated by wind power. But the problem with renewables is that they're expensive. So a lot of people have seen big hikes in their electricity bills. And my worry is that we're going to push a lot of people into fuel poverty, and that means that there's a direct relationship between the poorer segment of the population and the amount of money they have in terms of their health. That will actually make health worse. So I guess what I would like to do is to see a bit more detail. So you started to mention that in terms of procurement. You're absolutely right. Buildings, it should be a statutory part of new buildings, of how do you reduce the carbon footprint. I'm not sure what net zero means, for example. I think that needs defining. As far as I can see, it means buying carbon credits, such as forestry and various things, which is expensive and somebody has to pay for it. So at the end of the day, I'd just like to see more detail and to actually work it through as to the potential impact it might have on our health and social security services. So I'll shut up at that point because it is obviously a very complicated area.
Thank you very much, Dr. Metcalf. Yes, I think those comments are very valid. So, I mean, from my point of view and the point of view of our team, what we would like to see, or what we're working towards and are seeing progress towards, is sustainability and climate change issues being considered alongside other factors across the council and all of the areas of work. And it will be in these places that we would then see those decisions being made, where as councillors and others involved in making decisions would be able to weigh this up alongside decisions like health and poverty and things like that. So I absolutely agree that there's definitely a lot of scope for consideration of how this all links together, and the strategy and what we're trying to move towards at the moment is ensuring that sustainability and climate change is considered in the right places in the council, rather than being maybe an afterthought or an add-on, and then decisions can be made hopefully taking into account as a best view of reality and what the options are as possible. So I absolutely understand that, and with your regards to a request for more detail, that is what we are currently working towards. And for example, with the carbon budgets that we're putting together as a council for the year 2021 to 2022, we are now having more direct involvement from the directorates in putting this together and planning it, and that's just a small step forward, but another step forward in ensuring that we are getting more inputs and direct leadership from across the council, and hopefully that will mean that these decisions are taken in light of a full balance of information. And then finally, in terms of net zero, that's another fair comment. We haven't got a set definition of net zero. We've got it obviously written in the climate change declaration, but what that actually means and what that actually entails is, that's still to be worked out. So that's a fair point as well.
Thanks, Joel. I think that on the whole is reassuring, and I look forward to seeing the work progress. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I think in terms of the question you posed about how do you engage with the wider stakeholders, I think perhaps some of the members around the IJB table would be able to perhaps help you to host a webinar, seminar, something like that, in terms of how you get input from that wider stakeholder viewpoint. John Tomlinson, please. John.
Thank you, Chair. It's very similar to what you've just discussed between Malcolm and Joel there. I understand you're looking at the how, but it's this bit about the what. And although it's a 25-year period to 2045, it's a question of what can be given as advice as investment or change in the early period that will actually have the most effect going forward. And so I suppose it's a suggestion that practical measures and assisting with that so that it can be built into budget considerations as early as possible. So a plea, I suppose, to get to that stage and be giving that advice, or if it's not yourselves, then somebody else. So is that possible? And it's maybe just the balance of what's coming across in the declaration. There are probably some audiences, probably like you have today, where you don't have to convince them on the need to do it. And it's more, so what does it entail for the Health and Social Care Partnership?
Thanks, John. Joel?
Yeah, thank you very much again. That's a very fair point again. That's come up in slightly different language or words from other councillors, but that's something that we are working towards. So as an example of where this type of work is progressing is in business services. Our energy team working with finance have been drawing up some data on looking at different investment options around buildings, for example, low carbon technologies, and trying to compare those and saying, well, which, given the data that we know, would make the best financial investments, would save the most carbon for the least cost, or even a positive cost, so to speak. So that's one area that has been progressed in business services, and it has been commented on a number of times that we would like to see that moved wider across the council, so that we are able to make these decisions based on some kind of assessment of which would be the most cost-effective technologies to invest in, or different routes to go down. So it's that's where we're going and we're heading. I appreciate it's very easy to say that. It's going to be a very obviously a very complex process to work that out across different areas, but we are making progress in engaging with the various directorates and getting people involved. And so, for example, we now have assigned carbon budget leads for each of the 4 directorates in the councils that have been assigned by the directors, and they are working together on the carbon budgets and how we will evolve the carbon budget going forward.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Mrs. Wood, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Joel, for both the presentation and also I would say for the debate that I've just heard around this, because I think it has been a really, really helpful one. So as Joel just mentioned there, we already are working closely with Joel and his team. So we have one of our team from the business and strategy team who's identified to work closely with Joel. But I actually just wonder whether there's another conversation about the strategic planning group, because I think that could be potentially one of those wider stakeholder groups, that it might be really, really helpful for us to consider our obligations through this work stream alongside everything else. So Joel, I wonder if that's maybe something we could pick up off table, just to think about how we could link in better through that, just to ensure that all of our plans and processes are being considered through this lens too. So happy to do that off table. Thank you, Chair.
I think that would be very helpful. And again, you know, if you were minded to organise a webinar, then I'm sure some representation from the IJB would would be happy to attend that webinar, Joel, in terms of your wider regional stakeholder approach. But I think for me, it's the impact of all of this on, as Malcolm said, was poverty and particularly inequalities around our communities. So I think that would be really good. And Dr. Metcalf's agreeing that a webinar with representation from this board would be helpful. So again, is that something that you can take forward? I don't see any other indications. Do members have any other aspects of the items on 4.8 and or the questions that Joel has raised to contribute? I think one of the questions is, are we supportive of this direction of travel? From those that have spoken, I think the answer would be yes. But
you're seeking an answer, Chair. The answer is yes.
Yes, thank you, Dennis. Thank you very much. That would be helpful. So hopefully that will give you a flavour of some of the areas that would be of import to us, Joel. I think the offer to go to the strategic planning group would be really useful. And if we can be involved in any webinar or similar event that you'd want to organise for stakeholders, I think again we would contribute and be represented at that. So hopefully that gives you some comfort as well as some support for the direction of travel.
Great. Thank you very much for your time, all. That's much appreciated.
Thank you very much. And should there be a need for you to come back at some point, then we'd be happy to have you back again. So thank you for that. So the recommendations for this report, colleagues, is on page 184 of your pack, and it's recommended that we consider the climate change declaration and provide views on how the Council should work towards the targets and commitments which it sets out, both with reference to the area covered by this board and more widely as appropriate. Can we agree that, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure Joel would welcome any comments by email, or if you think of anything after the meeting, I'm sure he would be happy to receive those. So thank you very much. We'll move then, colleagues, to item 12 on our agenda, which is consultation on the review of the Model Code of Conduct. And I'd ask Lauren Cowie, please, if Lauren would introduce the report for us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, thank you very much. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lauren Cowie. I'm the Principal Solicitor for Governance for Aberdeenshire Council. So firstly, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to come along today to start to gather your views on the review of the Code of Conduct, which is currently underway by the Scottish Government. The report in front of you sets out the proposal for how your views will be gathered and also summarises the changes that are being proposed. Given how important the Code of Conduct is for all members of the IJB, that's voting and non-voting, I'm really keen to hear all views, comments and any concerns that you may have on the proposed amendments, some of which are the most fundamental changes that there have been since the inception of the first code back in 2003. The purpose of the review of the code is to clarify and to strengthen it, and also to define areas which have long been tricky to navigate, such as the Declarations of Interest section. 4.3 of the report summarises all of the changes that are proposed. The code has been simplified and it has been rewritten into the first person. The General Conduct section has been extended to be much more explicit around bullying and harassment being unacceptable, and the section of Declarations of Interest has had a significant overhaul. The Code of Conduct underpins all behaviour of those who are in the public eye on bodies such as the IJB. The Code and adherence to it ensures public confidence in those serving on the IJB and also provides recourse to action if those standards are not met. The Audit Committee of the IJB has a role in improving the governance, and so the IJB are recommended to agree firstly that a response should be submitted to the Scottish Government's consultation and that the Audit Committee take a lead in a response to this. I'm happy to take any comments at the moment. I'm also happy to take any comments that members have between now and perhaps into the first week of January if that's appropriate.
Thank you very much indeed for that introduction, Lauren. And do members have any questions for Lauren at this point?
Chair Dennis here. Chair.
Sorry, Dennis,
okay,
please,
can I go?
Please
yeah,
carry
okay.
on. Yes,
Right,
sorry.
Lauren, with regard to the members' declaration of interests, one of the things that I know that has been raised before, seek your opinion on this as well, is members' privacy. So at one point, people could maybe have their address within that. So in terms of privacy, is it best to have a sort of, if it was an IJB, for instance, just to have that sort of HQ type address and not a member's address? If that makes sense. Thanks, Lauren.
Through the chair, if you're happy for me to come back on that.
Absolutely, just carry on, please.
There are definite provisions, because I know that has been a real concern for members before having their addresses made so public, and that's something that has definitely been addressed by the code, particularly in relation to the councillor's code of conduct, which I'm much closer to, as you'll all appreciate. There is provision that a list of all addresses that are connected with members should be provided to the monitoring officer. However, that will not be made public, and it would just say property within a particular constituency. So that provides members with still a route for openness and transparency. However, it does give them and afford them a lot more protection and privacy.
Thank you for that, Lauren, and I'm sure that gives a great deal of assurance to many that maybe wish to have that sort of degree of privacy. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Lauren. I don't see any other indications, so can members turn to the recommendations on page 188, please. We're being asked to acknowledge the launch of the Scottish Government's consultation on the revised Code of Conduct relevant to the IJB, and agree the IJB will submit a response to the consultation, and that the IJB Audit Committee will prepare and table draft response for the Board's consideration on the 3rd of February prior to its submission. Can we agree that, please?
Agreed.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Lauren, and members. If you have any comments, the offer is there from Lauren to submit them to her by the first week of January. So thank you all very much indeed for that. Colleagues, the next item on our agenda is item 13, and before we consider the report, I would just indicate to the board that Mrs Wood will step out of the meeting for this item.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And if you turn to the report, it's item 13, appointment of Chief Officer. Michael, is Michael on the call to take us through this, please? Nope. I don't think so. Okay. So, as you know, the report sets out the fact that the Chief Officer's post is an interim post, and following the appointment of Mr Caldwell's to a substantive post in NHS Grampian, we have now started the process to recruit permanently to the post of Chief Officer for Aberdeenshire's IJB. The report is clear. There are appendix within the report which set out the timelines and the documentation relevant to job description, etc. So members will have had time to have a look at that. We've been asked to consider and approve the recruitment process and timeline to appoint to the post of Chief Officer, and agree membership of the Aberdeenshire Health and Social Care Partnership Appointments Subcommittee. With regard to the latter point, it's proposed that that would be 4 members from the IJB, 2 members would be the Chair and the Vice Chair, I would propose, and a member of NHS Grampian's representatives, and a member from the Council's representatives in addition. So 4 members, 2 the chair and the vice chair plus one from each of the partner organisations. That would be the proposal. I'm happy that names are submitted following the meeting to Jan McRobbie. If we want to discuss that amongst our own groupings. So I'll now open it to members for any comments, questions on the report itself. I don't see any questions or comments on any of the information before us. Can we agree the recommendations that we approve the process and timeline, and that you agree that the membership of the appointments panel should be 4, the chair, the vice chair and 2 others to be advised, 1 from the remaining members of NHS Grampian and 1 from the remaining members of Aberdeenshire Council. Can we agree that, please?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. And if the partnership groupings could discuss, and we'll put names forward to Jan, that would be very helpful. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, it's my intention now to take a very short break to allow us to enter the private session. This is now the end of the public session, and recordings will be stopped. We will consider the reports